Good luck. Puts on the step, goes right through, puts on the step again. Oh, go Freddie! That was magnificent stuff. Well, they shall not believe them. Marshall skips away, Marshall's still going. Mullins opens up again. Oh, look at him go. He beats O'Davis on the outside.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of The Voluntary Tackle, the only NRL podcast which still wants DCE selected for the next Kangaroo Tour. Well, someone needs to clean and press Nathan Cleary's pockets after a day of Cameron Munster holding them. You found me, Big T, the Rugby League podcast version of an 18th man. On today's show, we'll be discussing our Origin Series win, best and worst changes over the last years, NRL expansion, NRL DJs, and much more. But first, joining me in the Sports Best Friends studios tonight is the most proudest man of James Tedesco, this side of James's parents, Xander Risotto. Welcome, sir.
Good to be with you guys.
And on a scale, Xander, of 1 to 9, how many O's would you use to describe how much you want to boof Teddy right now?
Mate, it is off the Richter scale. Like, you know, seriously, close relatives are welcome as well.
And I would also suggest that the Richter scale is what one would use when measuring boofing Teddy, so that made lots of sense. And with us is the most proudest person of Tom Trebojevic, this side of his brothers. Welcome, Media Watch Mario.
G'day.
Now, how many times would you slip in "I love you" to Tommy during a 30-second jersey signing meet-up and greet?
Oh, certainly more than my children would get combined.
Great. That's a perfect answer. Our coach, Eamon Brown, sitting patiently in the coach's box like Boyd Cordner in a New South Wales polo, is still busy parenting and only has time to tell us to keep recording. But regardless, Xander, please, regale us with your weekend.
Yeah, but it was fairly low key in COVID lockdown Sydney. I should just say that similar to Boyd Cordner, Eamon has suffered a number of concussions and is also similarly still quite lucid and with it all the same. But yeah, no, my weekend was pretty good. I took full advantage of the ability to go outdoors and exercise still. So we just kind of had a fairly normal weekend, just with more masks and hand sanitizers, really.
Ooh,
yeah,
sexy.
and then capped it all off. It's the way I roll. Capped it all off with watching a thumping Blues victory over probably the worst Maroons side in history, I think we can safely say.
Ooh. Well, we will say that once we beat them 60-0 in the third game. And it's also good to know that you're the people that people are taking sneaky photos of as they walk down Bondi promenades doing what they're allowed to do but being told they're not allowed to. Now, this will all make no sense to you, Mario, because if you're not in lockdown, you're in a great part of New South Wales that is currently COVID-free. How was your lockdown-less weekend?
Well, we still have the masks out. That's a statewide thing, but that's all.
Oh.
That's all we're having to put up with at the moment. At this stage, our week away to Port Macquarie will be happening. Fingers crossed. So weekend was pretty. Not much happened here, apart from my 5-year-old getting to enjoy his first game of Origin, watching it on TV, and managed to stay awake the entire time, which was a stretch for him because he's normally asleep long before 8 o'clock.
Mm. You're getting too far into the Origin channel. I'm just going to pull you up a bit there. Now, we have a large listenership in Port Macquarie, so now when they see a very handsome, quasi-Italian marathon-looking man walking around talking loudly about how great everything is, those people should come up to Media Watch Mario and COVID safely elbow bump him and then wait for him to correct their grammar or punctuation as they talk to you. Now, let's go back, Xander. I want you to tell me about where you were for your lockdown Origin, who was with you, that kind of thing. Paint us a bit of a risotto picture.
It was pretty low key, mate. I got to say, I was literally just sitting at home watching it with my wife, who, as I've discussed before, has a passing interest in both rugby codes, but was rather busy and not engaged, and sort of slightly annoyed that the football was on in the first place. So it was just me in lockdown at home watching it by myself and trying to out yell my neighbours when a try was scored.
Now, I've got to tell you, busy busy, unengaged, and slightly annoyed the football's on is exactly how my wife would describe intimate time with me. So it's great that your partner feels the same way. Okay, and so she stayed awake for the whole thing. That's great. Mario, can you paint a media watch picture for us?
Mine sounds the same as Xander's, just with an added child. My wife watching Origin, probably mostly even looking at the TV for the entire game, and clearly being slightly annoyed that the game was on, but I think enjoying it more, just being part of the experience of winning, plus of my son having his enjoyment of being allowed to stay up late and watching the Blues win.
And not just watching them win. I mean, as I alluded to at the beginning of the show, it had a real, delightfulness if you were a Rabbitoh, a Rooster, or a Sea Eagle, because I don't want to. I mean, I do want to go minute by minute if you'll allow me. But the first 10 minutes was. I'll just quickly actually paint you a tea picture. Everyone in my house, my child had gone to bed. The most beautiful Tiger was in her room watching Netflix, and she had arranged for me, and I should point this out, she had arranged for some chicken nuggets and sausage rolls to be ready by halftime, as a kind of delightful way of doing football, considering I couldn't be at the pub. So that was so lovely of her. And so that was lovely. But I was sitting watching it on a work iPad on my couch, so it was very far away from what I was normally used to in my Leichhardt Bowling Club setting, but enjoyable nonetheless. The first 10 minutes, I was surprisingly unworried. Queensland didn't look bad. They looked like they were playing good football, but we also looked like we were playing good football. And then, big truck Trell. Do either of you feel like you want to describe it, or would you like me to keep going?
I'll keep going.
No, wax lyrical, mate.
Oh, because, I mean, I drew a picture of it today. I've just been watching that replay over and over again. Nathan Cleary kicks a long reefing kick downfield just for meters. Big truck Trell puts it into third, revs his way all the way downhill, and then hits that poor winger, Kyle Felt, with everything he's got. And Kyle Felt, just pleased to still be alive, forgot that he should also be holding the ball, and Big Truck Trell bulldozed those insanely beautiful arms into the chest of Felt and pulled that ball out. And I have never been so excited about a defensive play, possibly in my life, since Simon Dwyer put a big shot on your bloke letters, how many thousands of years ago that was. That was just such a moment. And because we ended up winning it, it really feels like, a huge moment. But even in present, I just felt even if we lose this game, that was such an incredible Origin moment. Xander, how did you respond when you saw that?
Yeah, like you, I watched the game the first 10 minutes. Still kind of confident, but a little bit more worried that there was going to be that sort of Queensland, classic, I guess, spiteful performance where they just play well above themselves. But New South Wales just kept totally. They were winning the field position battle up until that point, and I think it's fair to say that Kyle Felt that.
Yes.
I just have to throw something like that in there. But no, that was one of the defining plays of that opening stanza. And Trell, one of the things that really impressed me about him, and has in the last game as well, is he was effectively dropped from New South Wales by Freddie because he perceived a bit of a lack of effort in Game 3 a couple of years ago, right? Like that he thought that he wasn't putting that much effort in defence. And Jesus, I feel like Trell has come, back with a vengeance to really prove that not only can he do those sorts of, the less fancy parts of the game in defence, but he can do them in a way that is so impactful that they're almost more standout than his attacking plays.
Yeah.
His intercept was something else, but some of his defensive plays in the last couple of games have just been defining.
Yeah, and his reads are phenomenal. I mean, the intercept's one of those reads, but there's two other times where he put so much pressure on the halfback on Munster and DCE that they were already not having great games, but Latrell just scared them. They literally looked scared. Just because he's such a big shot. It's not just that he'll hit you. He's such a big shot. It was so scary. The intercept, though, Mario, was that as exciting as the reef, or what? How did you see those two plays?
The the strip was good, but it doesn't. I think when you're watching with a 5-year-old, you're looking for different things, and he sees a play like that, and he doesn't appreciate it quite the same way as watching someone streak away on his way to score. So when Latrell took that intercept, David and I both jumped up at the same time, and I yelled out, "The thick king's away!" And Davey started going, "Go, go, Latrell, go!" And it was just hilarious, and just watching him just jog his way all the way to the line and no one really making much
smiling
was amazing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And there's a great interview with him afterwards where he's saying he gets that ball, he fakes out. It's just incredible also to think the small little like nuanced parts of the game. Even people like us who've watched it for 100,000 years still have so much to learn. And so the way that he gets Valentine's Holmes to throw that is by a double knee fake out or something that he says, where he comes in, comes back out, and goes back in. And so gets Holmes to throw that. And then that's why he knows how to catch it, because he's actually essentially told him, you should throw a pass now because I'm out of position. And then catches it. But he immediately says he got to about the 30 or 40 and he's looking for Addo-Carr. But by the time he'd hit the 50-metre line and now the other side of the field, he started to realise that he could make it the entire way. Now, all of us were in the exact same mindset. Where he got into the backfield, we were all thinking, geez, I hope someone from New South Wales catches him so he can get rid of this ball. But also then started to go, holy crap, that huge unit, it just has so much momentum, no one's ever going to stop him except for himself.
Yeah, you could
What
just imagine him. You could imagine had Xavier Coates run him down, although we have established in the last few weeks that the one tackle Xavier Coates is actually good at is tackling from behind once Latrell's burned him. But you just feel like, no, he wasn't stopping him that time. Latrell was going to put the big right arm out and just say, get stuffed and drag him across.
And he also did that to Dan Gagai where he threw him around. And towards the close of the first half, though, Trell had done enough to put us up quite a lot. And Tom Trbojevic finally decided that he was going to also remind everyone that he's one of the greatest players in the game. And Tom had some great spiking bits, Murray, on that right-hand side. Again, with Tedesco constantly pretty much involved in everything. But the one that I loved from Turbo is that one where James is scooting. They get a great little ball out to Turbo, and then instead of Turbo running, drawing, and passing, he gets it as quickly as he can to Addo-Carr because he just knows that he's going to burn everyone down that sideline, but stays in touch with him. I mean, that must have also got your son right out of his chair.
Well, you can thank Jason Saab for that play.
Oh.
Pure and simple, because Manly all season, since Tommy's come back, that's been their play, is get the ball. You see any space, give it to Saab, he'll burn them down the right. Tommy basically just played like he had Jason Saab outside him because Addo-Carr is the same speed. It's the exact same play. They've done that many times. And, yeah, it was great. I mean, it was pretty depressing watching Cam Murray just bombing tries all over the place, and then somehow getting
two
from
massive tries.
Like Murray he played okay apart from that, but I'm sorry, you can't bomb two absolute gimme tries the way he did and still get a point above Tommy Turbo. I like Peter Sterling, but his awarding of man of the match, like the 3-2-1, was a joke. It was a joke. Teddy was great. Teddy was the second best player on the field, but Latrell was the best by a country mile, in my opinion, and he should have been man of the match. But much like, let's say Latrell had got it in game one over Tommy, it wouldn't have been a miscarriage of justice because Latrell was awesome too. Same goes here. Teddy was awesome, so I'm not too upset about that.
The only thing I will say about Cam Murray is that Tino and David Fafita were invisible in that game. People are going to put that on them. But I'm putting that squarely on Cam Murray because I don't think they've ever really played particularly good for Queensland. It's because Fittler has always put, instead of playing Cam in that lock position like a lot of us wanted, he's always put Cam in front of those two guys, and they have been absolutely nullified because Cam Murray doesn't miss. And so that has been one of the parts of his game since he's been playing for New South Wales that has just been so consistent and incredible. And there was even a game, I think in 2018 and 19, where we lost a centre. We put him out there in the centre when everyone could finally see him one-on-one, constantly never losing a tackle. And He was fantastic defensively. Maybe that's what Peter saw. Maybe Peter and I are just smarter than you, Murray, and that's what you're learning tonight. I'm not sure.
No, what I would suggest is I agree that Cam Murray was very good defensively, but all the Cam Murray frothers out there who say that he was amazing purely based on making some tackles are the same people who like to say Jake Tolman because all Jake does is make tackles and never ever miss them. So they cannot, have it one way or the other, people. But Murray is either amazing because of his defense and in spite of what he did in attack, and so is Jake Turbo, or they both suck. Pick one.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about great defense because Tom Trbojevic New South Wales has an incredible attacking first half. And then just to show that they're not just an attacking machine, they then have a clean sheet, incredible second half. And one of those is in the 54th minute where Tom Trbojevic, they finally score. Queensland score for all money. They just get a long arching pass out wide. Xavier Coates has done this 1,000 times, and here he is in the corner. But, of course, he's on the wrong wing, and so he uses his right arm, and Tom Trbojevic is just so special that not only does he make that space up and doesn't give up on that play, but instead of trying to tackle or shoulder charge, whatever a normal player would do, he's got arms out looking for that ball vis-a-vis Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, I think it's in round 1 or round 2.
Yep.
Xander, I know that Mario wants to keep talking about Tom, but I'm going to give you a chance. Trbojevic in that moment there, incredible.
Oh, that effort. And to be fair, there was, I think, I counted, 4 massive try-saving efforts by New South Wales, but that was probably the most spectacular of them. Him coming across to cover that distance in that amount of time in that position is superhuman. And yeah, just knocking it out just shows the desperation there. Similar with it was more impressive what Turbo did, but To'o as well, even though he was outgunned for height, he managed to prevent 2 what would have been certain tries by just causing enough interference, for either, I think it was Capewell in one of them, and can't remember, and Phelps the other one. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Perfect positioning, perfect timing, because Phelps got the wood on him in height and in experience for those situations. You're right. The other great thing about it is that I want you to talk about, Xander, is Tedesco, dummy half, looks up, sees that he's outnumbered 5-2 and still backs himself against Josh Adokar in the 70th minute. With Josh Adokar, sorry.
Oh, yeah. No, Teddy, I think there's a few people who sort of thought he had a bit of a quiet game by his standards in game 1. I think that was partially because he was just surrounded by so many superstars. He still had a pretty bloody good game.
Agreed.
But yeah, he just has an ability to bounce out of tackles and keep momentum going, the likes of which, Trell and Turbo both bring very different sort of, I think, skill sets to the game. But what Tedesco does is he just creates such an uncertainty in defence where they're always standing off him because they're never confident they can catch the bugger. And yeah, when he was able to just go in with Adokar there, that was that typified the character he showed in that game. He created a lot, but just the level of challenge he posed to that Queensland side, they never managed to account for him all night, I didn't think.
I mean, taking that on when it's 5-on-2 is like, as a coach, you'd fire him. It was such a stupid play. It was never on. It was tackle 0. I just couldn't believe, because they'd had a set restart in that thing. It was just insane. But the fact that it came off just showed not only the confidence in each other, but just the supreme ability. But it was just incredible. But the only one I talk about, Josh Adokar's great, and he had a great game. He scored 2 tries. He did everything a winger should. Brian To'o, though, a bunch of times took 2, and there was one set where he even took 3 runs in that. It's just all run meters. That bloke ended up with 230, which is only 4 behind Tedesco. Now, Tedesco that's a huge effort from him as well. So I'm not diminishing what Tedesco did. He did that extra 4 meters though with 3 extra runs. And so just Brian taking those and tackle 1, tackle 2, anytime the ball went dead, To'o took the first and as I said, often third hit up there. And the thing that Billy Slater and Joey kept talking about was how New South Wales players could get behind to play the ball much faster than Queensland's. And They put that down to fitness or enthusiasm or whatever. But one thing that they completely neglected to talk about was that also New South Wales was moving up the field faster and therefore catching their forwards earlier. So optically it looked like they were getting behind the play the ball faster, but in actual fact, Brian To'o was dragging the ball up past the forwards often faster. And it just can't be underestimated how important those first two runs are on every single set. And we see it all the time with six again defensively. That's so important that you'd even give away that first tackle if you can get that defensive line set, because they know that they'd rather, if you get momentum on that first, second and third tackle, it can have a huge impact on your fourth and fifth. And so you're happy to give away a tackle just to slow that momentum down, but To'o just refused to let them do that. And Tom Trbojevic had those runs a lot of time as well, even with his height. But I probably underrated To'o a lot before this series, and I just feel near embarrassed by how incredible he was in both games.
I think with To'o...
You know what he reminds me of, actually?
Sorry, I think with To'o, I think what's so important about him is the fact that he's that little bit shorter means they keep kicking it to him. But that is to the detriment of the team doing the kicking, because, as you said, he's just so good at running the ball back. He's basically Matt Utai with speed, instead of this.
That's exactly what I was about to say. I was about to say he has the leg drive of Matt Utai. So when he does go into contact, they just can't stop him.
Yeah, they're actually better off to Josh Adokar more often, because he's not going to make those same meters. Although then their problem is then off that second tackle, Adokar passes, the dummy half passes to Tommy, and then Tommy makes the same meters anyway. Like there was no winning for them.
Yeah, it was incredible. Now, you mentioned at the top of that then, Xander, you think this could be the worst Queensland team of all time. Now, they've had that pegged on them a bunch of times and ended up winning that series. This is the first time they've had it pegged and they've been pegged. And I mean, do you really think that is the worst Queensland team, or do you think it could actually be just one of the best New South Wales teams?
No, I'm taking the piss. I don't think they're the worst Queensland team of all time. I mean, I still think, they had a few outs, obviously, with Harry Grant being out, obviously the bizarre situation with Walsh and Mulatalo. But they still had the test halves for Australia. Still had, a lot of Kangaroos representatives in general, actually. Josh Papali'i, and like David Fafita. These are great, representative players that they have littered throughout their side. They struggle a bit at fullback and hooker. They still have the incumbent Kangaroos halves though, and a lot of and some decent strike in a Queensland in a Broncos side that they're able to draw on that's just been underperforming below its actual capability. So Coates and that has strike. A lot of these guys have strike. They're just they were just shut down. They were just completely outclassed. I think it is more about just how good this New South Wales side is, and it is a bit reminiscent of the mismatch that you saw when you had those poor New South Wales sides who had to it was Mitchell Pearce was our best seven and up against Cronk, Thurston, Slater, Inglis, Smith, just chalk and cheese. It's always going to be hard to win against that big of a class gap. And I think with what we're seeing with Cleary, Luai, and then our freakish mix of three fullbacks with two of them playing in the centres and then just out and out finishes with Adokar and To'o, and more than that, they're almost second forwards with To'o. It's just too much. We said it after the last game, but they talked about trying to shut down Trbojevic. Just you start focusing on Trbojevic, then you're forgetting about Mitchell, and then you're forgetting about Tedesco, and you're frankly probably also not paying enough attention to Cleary and Luai. So it's very hard to contain.
Murray, do you agree that is it the New South Wales team that's too good, or is it the Queensland team that's not good enough?
I think this is one of the best New South Wales teams ever. Not the best, but the back seven, certainly in my life, I don't think there's ever been any better, because even when you had Joey and Freddie, there'd always be a couple of slight sort of weaknesses there. Maybe not weaknesses, but people just not quite on that level. Now, although I think on paper, the 1996 Queensland team is not as good as the team that were trotted out yesterday, but you underestimate just how bad a coach Paul Green is. To give you a bit of context to that, Paul Green is the guy. So he had playing for him what some people believe, incorrectly albeit, but to be the greatest halfback of all time, Jonathan Thurston. And yet he led them to 13th, 14th, and 14th in 3 consecutive years. Now that, I'm sorry, is not a good coach in any stretch, in any way you think about it. Yes, they won a grand final. Yes, they made another grand final. But that is just Des took the 2014 Bulldogs to a grand final. You know, strange things do happen, but you look at his numbers overall as Cowboys coach, and they were bad. And you look at what he's done with Queensland, and they were useless in game 1. And they, apart from maybe 15 minutes, they were not that much better the other night. So I think when you add up Paul Green as the coach, I think this is the worst Queensland team of all time, just because of the lineup. Obviously, if Harry Grant or Reid Marnie were playing at hooker, that would help a lot. But my God, Andrew McCulloch is not a first-grade player. He's atrocious.
Yeah, that was a bad selection. And it was a bunch of double pumps or misreads from him that really cost them. Now, I'm glad you brought up Green, because in his press conference afterwards, which I, of course, ate up like dessert, he was really quite sad, and so was DCE. But they were upset, first of all, with the result losing the series, but they were also speaking a lot about Ronaldo Mulitalo, and a lot of the media since has talked about not having him or Reece Walsh, and then also a little bit about how the forwards didn't turn up. Now, the forwards not turning up for me is a real conundrum, because they had a lot of fantastic players in that team that played well. Their forward pack wasn't shut down. Papali ran for over 100 metres. Christian Welch ran for 130 metres. Their forwards worked. Jai Arrow, 102 metres. It was decision-making everywhere else that I think was the thing that fell down, like the hooker you just mentioned, like DCE. But in the press conference, DCE and Paul Green they're talking about how disappointing it was that the QRL, the NRL, actually they blame the NRL, not the QRL, for the Ronaldo Mulitalo. Now, the crazy thing about that is Ronaldo Mulitalo is a good footballer for the Sharks, but he's not anything that anyone's been talking about really origin-wise up until this year. And even then it was because of so much injury. And Reece Walsh started playing this year. So are those two players really coming in and having such a big impact that when you lose them a couple of days beforehand that it's worth
not at all
discussing in a press conference, Mario?
Not at all. It's just that's a classic deflection. That's all that was. It was so transparent. It was just pathetic. The idea, Paul Green as the coach, he should come out and take the blame. DCE as captain should come out and take the blame. Instead, they're trying to deflect, and what that is doing is saying to the team, it's okay to take the blame off the players individually, but to completely pass the blame onto the NRL. Now, I liken this situation, the Mulitalo thing, to the Willy Wonka movie. Now, basically, the way I see it, the ARL are Willy Wonka at the end of the movie telling Charlie, "No, you lose. Good day, sir." And the QRL are Grandpa Joe, absolute frauds who've been breaking the rules and just slacking off for the last 20 plus years. And people somehow think they're the good guys when in reality, they are the biggest cunts on earth.
Oh, wow. Mate, I remember Willy Wonka so different to you.
Wow.
I don't remember Grandpa Joe being a cheating asshole.
I remember him breaking rules and drinking that stuff and being... I do remember him as a kid being like, why is that guy telling him to drink the soda or whatever? He's getting everyone stitched up.
Hang on. You guys are killing me. You're killing me. Grandpa Joe...
I know.
20 years in a bed making his daughter slave away for to house this entire family, yet the moment the offer of chocolate is waved in his face, he's dancing around the room. The guy is a massive
you know
fraud.
what,
he is the worst character.
I stand corrected. You are absolutely right. I never even thought about it.
He is the only character in movie history worse than that guy from Love Actually who tries to steal Keira Knightley.
I don't remember that movie at all, but I'll take your word for it. But no,
Oh, no,
granted,
you
I
remember
think
it. It's a guy. There's a guy at Christmas who's got some signs and he's holding it in front of his best friend's new wife, and then she kisses him for some reason. I agree. That whole scene also, Murray, didn't make sense to me. And I'm happy to have another QRL analogy with that idiot. But okay, I love it. So Grandpa Joe's QRL. Now that I'm back, NRL was Willy Wonka.
Yeah.
And which one's Ronaldo? The soda pop?
I guess he's Charlie. I don't know. I think my analogy falls down a little bit there. But I'm just focusing on QRL and ARL.
Yeah, okay.
So, your
enough.
analogy will be revived if the ARLC decide to use their discretionary power to grant Mulatalo
Access to a hidden elevator.
Origin.
Bingo.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great.
Then
Yeah,
it'll perfectly stand up. But no, I reckon you're right, Mario. Like it's frankly ridiculous. I mean, they weren't disrupted by that. They were disrupted by the fact that they picked an 18-year-old kid who played 7 games as their backup, and then had him get injured on the day of the game. And then their backup was somebody who they never bothered to check if he was actually eligible for Origin. Like, I mean, it's a farce that it got to that stage. But there are three criteria that you can rest on to be eligible for Origin. He just didn't fit any of them. He didn't have a father who played for Queensland. He wasn't in Queensland before the age of 13. He was born in New Zealand. He grew up in Auckland, probably idolising the All Blacks, and he even listed on multiple contracts that he wasn't eligible to play Origin. So, I mean, it's a shame that he was selected for those sides and no one picked it up till now. But it was just a stuff up by the Queensland Rugby League, and people are out there comparing it to the Suwali situation. Suwali, to get the right to play a little bit earlier than he was going to be playing anyway, went through 8 months of applications, character references, agreements from other clubs before the NRL would actually allow it. Queensland just basically threw this guy on the list and hoped no one would notice that they hadn't done their due diligence.
Isn't that just classic Queensland? I mean, they got away with it in so many
precisely.
years. They got away with it with the original Queenslander. They got away with it with Greg Inglis. They got away with it with Israel Folau. They got away with it with Adrian Lamb even. The fact that his son is eligible for Queensland simply because his dad was wrongfully picked for Queensland is hilarious. It's just, they've gotten away with it for so long that why shouldn't they just try it with Mulatano?
Yeah, no, I mean, and ultimately, we're talking about a winger here. Wingers are important in the modern game. But it was more about the decision making of their halves. As you said, they had the go forward up front. That is a good forward pack. Papali'i, Welch, Arrow, and Fafita that's a formidable core if forwards you've got to give you go forward. But Cherry Evans had a very average game. Munster again tried his hardest, but was just completely outgunned in attack, and was actually made to look a bit of a fool by the New South Wales defence on a number of occasions. That was where they fell down. Is they were not coordinated in attack to begin with. It wasn't down to one winger that they couldn't get selected correctly.
Yeah, I mean, David Fafita actually came off the bench in this game, which is also delicious. So Felice Kafusi, who was the other back row you were trying to think of, one of Mario's favourites. But I would also suggest to you...
I just quickly, Kafusi, I got to say, the memes coming out of this series with him and Luai, just gold.
Yeah.
I feel bad for him, actually, but...
No, I think he's had his fair share of being the other side of that photo, so I think he's okay. The one other thing I'll just say about this before we move off it is Ronaldo Mulatalo, in my humble respects, isn't actually as good as Xavier Coates, and Xavier Coates probably should have been selected before him anyway, so it all came out the wash.
Agree.
I can't imagine why we worried about it too much. But speaking of the next game where we watch probably Xavier Coates play again on the wing, it will be in... Where, Mario?
I think it should be in Melbourne, given they missed out on the first game and they are now completely, free of lockdown. Whereas the talk of Newcastle for me doesn't make sense while a lot of New South Wales is still under restrictions. The only question mark I have over it going to Melbourne is, could they get even 40,000 people there if they're not allowing in Queenslanders or Victoria or New South Welshmen to get into the state to come to the game? So that's probably the big downside of taking it there, which leads me more to thinking Canberra should have it.
Risotto?
Yeah, Canberra, absolutely not. It's 12,000 seat capacity place. I just don't know why you play Origin down there. I think if you're going to take it somewhere, you take it, and I've spent a lot of time in Canberra, it's they'll get behind, the odd sporting event, but it's the town of, look, I mean, it's not a rugby league town like Newcastle is. And Newcastle, that stadium, has a capacity of 30,000 plus. It'll still be a good atmosphere up there, and they will attend regardless. And the additional problem you've got with Melbourne, which you're probably forgetting, in addition to the travel restrictions, the series has been decided. And the reason they want to start or play the second game in Victoria, or have their road show piece in before the third game, is because it's still a live series and there's still interest for the neutral. So neutral fans down there, they're going to a dead rubber. I mean, it just wouldn't work to take it to Melbourne or on the road anywhere else but Newcastle, in my view.
Okay, well, my Newcastle grandmother told me not to say Newcastle because she doesn't want it down there. She's genuinely concerned that people with the virus will go there. I think that's a bit of an old lady way of looking at it, but if that's what my nana said, then that's what I'm going to go with. Do you think they would be at full capacity though if McDonald Jones opens up? I just can't imagine the state government's going to let them do full capacity.
Yeah, so that's the condition, right? The condition is that if it's going to go to McDonald Jones, they have to have some assurance that they'll be able to be at full capacity. So that's the wrinkle in it. I mean, I honestly don't know where. They could potentially, keep it somewhere else to allow. I'm not really sure what they can do, but on the road, it's not good. It makes sense to keep it in a regional centre where you're assured support, but a dead rubber is going to be a harder sell elsewhere.
So what I'm hearing is it probably can't be Melbourne because although morally it makes sense because they lost game one, financially it might not make sense. New South Wales is going to be hard to sell because either it's going to be reduced stadiums or the stadium's going to be possibly too small. And the other then option is Queensland, and we do it at Cbus because they haven't had one, but surely it's going to be a harder sell than Melbourne to try and get Queenslanders to go and watch New South Wales be handed the trophy.
Yeah, I would have thought so. So no, I think it's either that or they delay it. They say we're actually going to delay game 3 until 6 weeks from now when the COVID situation's clarified, or 2 months or something like that.
Well, how does that work with the draw? You think they just hold over that round where they have buys and they just skip it forward to whatever week they're suggesting?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I imagine that's something that the NRL is now currently considering, but it's a tough one because it's a big revenue spinner for them, right? So I mean, in an ideal world, it is a decided series at this point. It's just for completionism that they're going to play that third game. If it was played at ANZ as a dyed in the wool Blues fan, I would absolutely go out and watch it to see us claim a clean sweep.
Yeah.
But I just think it'll be a hard sell in a lot of other places.
Is an option just to do it in front of no one at ANZ?
Yeah, I don't think the NRL will want that. I mean, you either sell 80,000 tickets, make a bucket of money, or do that. I think they'll opt for at least partial crowds if they can.
So we didn't come up with an answer. That's what I'm vibing. Well, Mario's saying Melbourne. You're still saying you're saying anyway, but Canberra. Is that
just do it at Suncorp?
Yeah, I don't.
Just do it at Suncorp. We'll beat them 3-0 in their own shitty state. So that seems like an even bigger win.
And only New South Wales people can go. So if they're taking COVID, they're only giving it to themselves. Yeah, I like that. That's a good fix. Now, speaking of giving COVID to other people and New South Welshmen, please tell me you've heard that the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs had 3 players that breached COVID lockdown bubble restrictions in the face of a growing New South Wales pandemic. Mario, you're the most angry person I know at a drop of a hat. How angry were you when someone dropped this hat?
I just looked at that story and I shook my head and I sighed because it was just so predictable. The only surprising thing was that it wasn't, Tavita Pangai Jr. or Payne Haas.
Yeah, somehow in Bali doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, and do you think the thing that upsets me about this kind of story is the peripheral fans, like people that I know and spend time with, just wipe this across all football players. Xander, they said that this is of course, what else are football players going to do? That this is the kind of stupid thing that football players do, and it's that kind of stupidity from one or two idiot players that then paint our entire sport with it. That's what got me most upset about it.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but I think the simple rejoinder to that is that when you look across the states, people are doing this everywhere. There's always somebody who seems to think the rules don't apply to them, and in a competition with as many professional football players, there will be a couple of dopes that do carry on like that, unfortunately. Generally, though, they've been pretty good, right? Like, the Project Apollo last year operated because all the players understood what was on the line. So I think it's just, more than anything, it's just going to be a bit of a refresher, and the players have actually been probably at a better standard than most of the rest of society, if you're being honest about it. It's just a perception thing. It's very hard to combat.
Yeah, well said. Now, while we're in clubland, I don't know if you've seen this as well, but the Parramatta Eels playing the Penrith Panthers this weekend, now that Origins are saying they're going to the rearview mirror, that would have been a fantastic game and should now be even more spicy because Nathan Cleary's got a bit of an injury niggle with his right shoulder, Mario. I'm worrying that, I still think that Penrith win without Nathan Cleary, but I can see that might be an issue. Where do you stand with that?
I think another big question is even it could be that, let's say he is a little bit injured, but Ivan might want to rest a player or two anyway, because it just depends how they all pull up from the game. I know it's a week after.
Yeah.
It was a it was a much tougher game than game one. So I could imagine a couple of guys being rested, and so who knows? So that could work in Parramatta's favour, and they could get, the standard Parramatta win where they, playing against a weakened team.
Xander, they're paying $2.70. I know you love a punt and you've got a bunch of mates who are punter friends. Is $2.70 too good to pass up with Nathan Cleary out, or still probably on the Panthers at $1.45?
You know what? This is a tough one for me, because the last couple of times that we've seen Penrith play, where they've been a little bit short, they haven't done very well. Right, but by the same token, this are the two games that they've lost. By the same token, I just remain inherently skeptical of the Eels. I don't know what it is about them, but I just think they're pretenders. Like, I can't.
35 years.
I don't think. Something about them. I'm just not convinced. I know since they've dropped. They've dropped Ferguson. They've tightened up on that edge, and they've stopped leaking so many points, and they've looked a little bit more of a character side. But I do have this niggling sense that they are flat track bullies, and if it's brought to them up front, that they'll wilt. And I don't know. I think the Panthers probably still have a bit too much in them, even without Cleary. If it's just Cleary that's out and the rest of them play out, I'd probably go with the Panthers.
Now, this is a huge aside. Flat track bully. Now, I understand what that term means because I've watched the Parramatta Eels for the last 2 years. But what does the term originate from? Is it a racing term? Like, do either of you have any idea what the term originally meant?
It's a good question, actually. I don't know. What is the etymology of?
Yeah, it's just because it's used so well in so many contexts that you eventually understand what it means. But it's a frustrating phrase, and I can't wait for someone to finally tell us what it means. Because it's frustrating me. But you mentioned, Xander, really quickly that the Penrith had lost already 2 games this year. Can you just remind me who they were against?
So who did they actually lose against? I actually can't remember.
Mario, can you help me out?
I'm not going to give you that satisfaction, but I will give you the satisfaction of saying that the term flat track bully was originally used for batsmen in cricket who tended to make hay while the sun shone and pitches were flat and thus unhelpful to bowlers.
And
There you go.
make
That
hay
makes
while the
sense.
sun shone. There you go. There's another expression to explain an expression. And that was what I was trying to do then. I was trying to make hay while the sun shone out of that small illegitimate joy that I was given 3 or 4 weeks ago. Now,
The
that was
Tigers.
one of the greatest.
Yes, that's right. Forgot
That
about
was
that.
one of the greatest things that had happened in the last few decades. But I want to know what you think, seeing that there's been a lot of changes and evolutions to our game over the last decade or two. I think officially the modern era started in 1980, but it doesn't really matter. So in the last few decades, what, Mario, has been your best change that you've seen in our beautiful game?
You're going to credit the creator of that question?
I will once you've finished answering it.
To me, the corner post rule.
Keep going.
We'd been calling for that to change for years. It never made sense that just touching the corner post meant out. It was always silly. And then what we've seen wingers and not just wingers, what we've seen people like Tavita Pangai Jr. do and the occasional centre and stuff out in the corner, the way they can finish, the way Xavier Coates almost finished the other night, the way, probably Corey Oates was maybe the best one I've ever seen, where he was basically sideways but kept his body, his feet off the ground and got just the one hand and barely scraped a blade of grass before he touched the ground. It's just absolutely miraculous stuff. But it's not just him, Rapana, Fusatua, that there's a bunch of guys who've just become amazing at it. And almost all the wingers, in fact, they just, I don't know if they actually practice it. It's a question that people ask, but you feel like they must, or they're just that naturally athletically gifted. They can just do that sort of shit. To me, it's made the game really, really exciting. I think for people who'd be a casual watcher of the game, with shoulder charges gone, that's something that a casual watcher could look at and go, whoa, that's amazing.
Yeah. And in fact, there's two things I want to pick up there. That's exactly what people often say should be the way that they sell rugby league. It's not about brutality or about how fast people can run, because that's something that a lot of sports have. But what we have is that we have such huge, athletic, strong bodies. As we said moments ago, Brian Toles looked like a forward in his body type, but then they're also that athleticism. So that mix of brute strength and size and real athleticism that you'd see in a lot of positions in an NFL or a lot of different sports, AFL body, but then also the athleticism that they have to have is incredible. But they do definitely train that. One of the drills I know is called four corners, where you start back to each other, you run through opposite corners, and then one person has the ball, one person does not. It's a very small, it's almost 4 by 4 meters, and it's 2-hand tag, and so that guy has such a small spot to one-on-one beat that person, and often they're encouraged to do that through picking a corner and sprinting at it and then diving like that with the ball. So it's certainly something that's been developed and trained for a really long time. Xander, what's your best change over the last decade or two?
So I was a bit torn on this one, like on just functional rule changes and then I guess broader competition eligibility and other issues. I think on balance, my favourite change to the game has actually been creating a tiered structure for representative football, where a player can opt to represent another country at a tier 2 level and also play State of Origin. I know we sort of discussed this, and the differences. Like, people are getting their knickers in a twist about Mulatalo, but he was a Kiwi and that they're a Tier 1 nation. But I think when you look at the, particularly like for somebody like me who's knows a lot of people in the Pacific Island community through my wife and others, just the boost of energy that having strong Tonga, Samoa, and Fijian sides that have been enabled by allowing that flexibility. Because up until now, a lot of players did opt to play for Australia or New Zealand as opposed to those island nations because, particularly in the case of Australia, because they wanted to play Origin. And I know this Mulatalo thing's pissed off a lot of people, but hey, suck it, Queensland. And it has just completely changed the complexion of international football and made it something that I don't think anyone expected. With the Tongan side that went and beat New Zealand, Australia, and England in succession last year. or the year before rather. It's quite incredible. Now, on an operational front, I will say just really briefly. This is going to be a controversial one, but I love the taking of the bunker behind the curtain and having on-field ref rules the try. I absolutely adore that that change.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that was a good change too. Also, just quickly back on 2019, where Tonga D beat the Kangaroos, which was great, I guess, for international rugby, but it really shut me off at the time. James Tedesco that year had won the grand final, had the grand final winning try. He also had the grand final winning try for New South Wales to take that series, and scooted from dummy half and was what I can only imagine a lace of the football away from scoring a try against Tonga to win that international test. And although a lot of people will tell me that it was great for Tonga to do that, there was also a much larger part of me that would have been forever indebted to James Tedesco in 1 year to see a play like that make those three huge players in 1 year. It would have just been history in the makingness. Now, that question was from JD1313. He did also ask the worst changes, but that's not the kind of podcast we are. We're all about talking about great things, Jay. So we appreciate your question. My one over the last couple of years is the creation of the NRLW. I think women's football is a fantastic part of our rugby league landscape internationally and locally. There is a huge amount of women who are trying to get into sports and girls who are trying to get into sports in lots of different body types through speed and touch and OzTag and then lots of things like that. It's a great team sport. There's so many great things about our game. And so it's so great that we finally gave them not just a chance to play it in local levels, but a real shining light to pathway to. And so it all happened in the same 5 years where the NRL took on tag and they took on touch, and because of that increased their numbers dramatically, but also then encouraged women and girls to play the sport more than they'd ever done before, and created NRLW. Now, the thing that I've recently learned about the NRLW is that it is not just fantastic for local and representative women in Australia, but PNG see it as a real way of supporting and getting something done for themselves as well. So they work really hard within their province and then their region and then their country to get noticed so that they can get an NRLW contract and then essentially change their lives and the lives of their families. So it is such a fantastic, and that's the thing that didn't exist a few years ago. So I'm such a massive fan of the NRLW, and that's probably my biggest positive change that's happened in the last decade. There has also now recently been the Titans added to it, Parramatta added to it, and someone else that I can't remember
Newcastle.
right now. Titans, thank you. That's my team. Thanks for reminding me. And there's a chat of adding another two next year. One of them should be the Warriors, who unfortunately couldn't be there this year. The other one is still up for debate. Now, there's been a bunch bandied out there, Perth, Melbourne, and a whole bunch of, obviously, Foundation, Sydney, New South Wales teams. Mario, what's your where are you leaning towards with another NRLW team?
I feel bad. I do feel bad for the Sharks in the women's comp because they probably more than any other team, from everything I understand, were sort of the pioneers. I believe they were the first one to be giving contracts to all their players and various other things. They were really pioneering women's footy for quite a while. That being said, I think they've missed the boat and I don't think they should have a team now. So New Zealand is an absolute certainty. They should be in there. You won't believe this out of my mouth. I think it should be Melbourne next.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say the same thing.
Well, why, Mario? I want you to talk lovingly about Melbourne for as long as I can.
I'll never be loving about Melbourne, I can't imagine. But to me, there is some small amount of exposure for rugby league in Victoria. I think having a good women's team and the visibility of a good women's comp there will actually do a lot for juniors. I think it has potential a lot for juniors. Being a parent of a junior player now, talking to other parents from my own club and various other clubs, it seems universal in the at least in the junior section that everyone is really enthusiastic about women's footy for their own selfish reasons of, oh my gosh, maybe now if my daughter plays, there's actually a future in it for her, whereas once upon a time I would have steered at a soccer or netball or something like that. And so I think that is a huge thing. Now, personally, my daughter doesn't want to play footy, and that's fine. But if she were, I wouldn't be sitting there thinking, geez, I hope she doesn't take this as a career because there's no future in it. You know, I'd be thinking, cool, there's something for her. So I really like that. And I think that's a good thing to get a bit of grassroots support happening. And I think that could be a good thing for the NRL and even for the Melbourne Storm.
And Xander, anything that Mario missed?
No, I agree completely with what Mario said there. I think that, you know, from a developmental standpoint, they might have a harder time of it than some of the foundation clubs who, as you rightly point out, particularly with the Sharks, have been putting the effort in here already. But I think from a strategic standpoint for the whole of game, it is critical that the game has a robust presence across every level in Victoria. WA would be nice, but we currently don't have an NRL team there, and it is a more difficult market, and there are challenges there. I think Auckland makes a lot of sense as well. The Warriors are an important market, but Victoria is critical.
And the other great thing about Victoria is, I mean, we mentioned there that there are some foundation clubs that are doing a great job, and the West Tigers and Sharks have been fantastic in the last few years trying to get a team. Same with South Sydney. They've been fantastic in this space, and the Roosters to another extent. But I also unfortunately agree with you because Victoria has a bunch of clubs that are doing a great job there. Waverley Panthers, the Peckham Eels, and my favourite, the Altoona Roosters. They're doing a great job, and they've been doing a great job with guys and have been doing well with guys for a few years, but also very quickly got on with girls. And so they see an NRLW franchise there. I think that helps. Now, the other thing that's come out about this is that there's been a push for the Broncos, the women's Broncos teams to be split up because they're so good. A lot of them don't want to move, one, because it's a winning culture, and two, because they don't get paid enough to be moved to another part of the country to have their family and careers moved, because unlike a lot of the men players, when they get moved, their job is moving them. So it's partially easier, whereas with a lot of these NRLW Brisbane players, their jobs aren't being moved. It's just one of their parts of their income for part of the year is being moved. And so there's a new debate about, is it okay? How do we cap this, and how do we help develop when we can't move people around? That's another issue you're going to have with Melbourne, is you're going to need to, at the present bit, send people down there, send their lives down there. And how feasible is that really, Mario? Can we ask people? It's important to rugby league that we start a Melbourne team, which also now means that a whole bunch of people who are great, Kezi Apps, you now need to move from Wollongong and now live in Melbourne because we need you to be down there for 2 months of the year. You're
right. That makes it really, really hard. I don't have an answer to that. I hadn't thought of it, and I can't believe I hadn't. Because as you say, it's not just them moving, it's their husbands or partners or whatever who, in theory, have to move down with them or might want to move down with them because, they don't want to be split up for months at a time. And as the comp expands, of course, the comp has to get longer, not just because there's more teams playing each other. So it's going to be not 4 weeks, it's going to be 8, 9, 10, 12 weeks. And I don't know the answer. The only answer possible really would be NRL pumping more money into it. But according to Peter Landis,
I think the answer is
broke.
more money. But that's interesting. So he said just recently, despite this current COVID lockdown, that the game's got itself in a really good financial position. So they made a bit of money off Anastasia Palaszczuk, which is nice. She very charitable woman. Hopefully, she might even pay another $8 million to bring the third game of Origin back up to Queensland. But I think it's ultimately that they're going to have to make a strategic decision in investing in the women's game more so, and ideally also the clubs will bear some of that burden. But it's a difficult one. You have to probably also just has to be a balance of maybe having almost a marquee system where they can afford to play some of those top line women to come down, but also invest more heavily in developing the local talent. So there's a pipeline there. They don't have to worry about relocating everyone.
Well, as you said, Mario,
another way they could do it would be when the Wolfpack were playing in the Super League, I believe, what they were doing was having home and away periods. So, they play 3-4 games in a row in Toronto, and then have a bunch in a row in England. So that could be an option at least. So if Melbourne are playing, let's say 8 games in a season or in a regular season, have the first 4 games or the last 4 games in Melbourne, so they can just have a little holiday for a month and then go back to normal sort of thing, being able to be based out of Brisbane or wherever.
Yeah, that makes a bit of sense.
Yeah, I mean that worked also though because those players were being paid a full wage, and so their only jobs were to play for the Wolfpack. Again, so to ask someone to pause their career or something like that has nothing to do with football for those periods of time would be challenging. This season's going to move from 4 weeks to 7 weeks this year, and then I think it'll move then to 9 weeks on the season after that. And so for the game to work and for it to also be, watchable and for it to continually improve, they also need a longer pre-season, and all of that takes time, money, aches and pains on bodies. And so it's a real issue that the NRL needs to sincerely and severely address before we continue insisting on people being part of that. Is there anything else you want to talk about before I move us on to our last and final question? That one was, of course, from Swiss_Cowboy78, who's one of my favourite accounts on Twitter, and so you should get around him if you're not already. But is there anything we want to say about NRLW before I move us on to our final fun one?
No.
None. I think that covers it.
Great. So at Ernie Oz, he's tweeted us a fantastic question. I'm going to start with you, Xander, because I feel like I know what your answer is going to be. Music DJs at the football. Are you a fan?
So I had no idea they existed. What I will say is that probably no. I've noticed that there have been DJs popping up at all kinds of random places. There is a DJ that inexplicably appears at the Westfield and Bondi Junction for some reason, just in the middle of the damn Westfield, and it drives me fucking nuts. I don't care what they have in the background. The music choices tend to be bad at football games anyway. I'd almost rather they didn't have any music at all.
Now, there's one thing I'm going to quickly pick up on there, Xander. Which level is the DJ on Westfield in Bondi Junction?
He's generally on the ground floor. If you walk in from, I can't remember which entrance that is, but the one that's as you're coming into the junction on the right. Every time I've been in there on a weekend, up until the last outbreak, it's just random DJ there.
Now, Murray, you might not know this because you've not been to that Bondi Junction that Westfield and Bondi Junction before, but Xander actually can't give that answer, and he doesn't know where it is. He thinks it's the ground level coming in on one particular door, because if you walk in to Bondi Junction through one door, you're on level 3, and if you remain on that same floor and just continue to walk without changing stairs or anything like that, and you can walk back out onto the same street, you're now on level 2. So it is the most Willy Wonka-ish, if we can finally tie back to that place you've ever been into in your life. That's infuriating enough, just pretending to know what floor you're on. So, of course, that DJ is probably trying to get to a show somewhere and just got lost and just stays where the hell he is.
And he keeps getting lost every week.
Yeah, and someone's paying him maybe, so he just keeps going. Mario, how are you feeling about DJs in football? I feel like you're going to like it.
For a while, I've strongly disliked it, but now I'm coming around. I don't see myself ever liking it, but at the same time, I just don't care. It doesn't. If you just ignore it, it doesn't really offend me. I don't have to like every song. Someone there likes the song and someone enjoys it, and we're in this era where it's damn hard to get a job, and live music and DJs and all these people are struggling to get a gig. Yeah. I don't mind them employing a guy to spin a few shitty tunes for 10 seconds in between each break. So whatever.
So effectively, your defense of the concept is they make sense as a bullshit job in the modern economy.
Pretty much.
Because it's better than getting welfare.
Yep. Why not?
Now, I thought you were going to like it from a trolling point of view, because I thought you were going to say that often like something would happen and then they would play Hit the Road Jack or something when the opposition team gets sent to the bin and things like that. But
they don't do it enough.
You're not a fan of that kind of DJ trolling?
I don't really see the relevance.
Missed opportunities.
Brian Toto scores a try and they're playing Umbrella, Ella. It's like, no, fuck off. What's that got to do with anything?
That's my issue. Yeah, if you'd gone to games and there were really clever songs and that sort of a time, then yeah, it'd be great. But as you said, it's just random shitty songs from like the 90s and noughties that have no relationship to what is happening on the field at all.
Now, I'm going to tell you now, I've just realised now that the guy at the ANZ who did South and Canterbury, definitely Canterbury, he is a friend of mine, and he did a great job because he's the first person I ever realised after about maybe 45 minutes that the songs were linking. I think there was 2 or 3 songs in where I was just like, they didn't just accidentally play that song because this just happened, did they? And then after about 3 or 4 of them, I was like, no, this guy's deliberately, he's watching the game and then quickly Apple iTunes searching his database to try and find the song that's going to match this situation. So I wish I could remember his name.
I see that's actually
quality.
I was about
to
say,
he was great.
We're going to have it. What we really should get Sid Punts from Full Credit to the Boys, get his sound panel, and just every time a player touches the ball, he can play one of his pre-recorded songs, such as "There's Only One Ronaldo," etc. I think now that would be entertaining.
Yeah, okay. And so his name was Andrew Rose. I think having the guy who's the DJ, so congratulations, Andrew Rose. I think having Sid Punts do that would be fantastic for the first round or 2, but then I think he would inevitably fall under the pressure and the power and end up doing really horrible songs or fart noises or things like that when people were playing the West Tigers. So I don't think he'd value the position long enough to do that. But can I get you to at least agree that if the DJ was clever or insightful, or at the very least spoke to the players and the players nominated songs, like in baseball when they come out, a particular song plays for them, maybe when they score a try, their song is played and then people get to know those players better because, oh, look, that's Ronaldo Mulatalo's song. Would that be a better DJ solution?
I mean, is someone walking out to the Hulk Hogan theme or the Ultimate Warrior theme? Because, then I'm down. I'm all in then.
Because imagine Tommy suggests some song and then you hear it 3 times. Well, that time Josh Adokar scored 5 tries in a game, 6 tries in a game. I think that song would then forever be etched in people's minds that was the night that we all watched Fox do that. And every time you hear that song, you'd be like, oh, this reminds me of Josh Adokar.
Look, I'm pretty sure Tommy Turbo's walking out to Belinda Carlisle or something lame.
And it's not walking out. I just want to clarify it's when you score a try.
Yeah,
but
indeed.
Okay, well, I guess he's walking out of the in-goal. Can you please remind me, Belinda Carlisle, what's her most famous hit?
Probably Summer Rain.
Oh, okay. And so, or Heaven is a Place on Earth.
Yep, that's another one.
It's sort of, yeah. Okay, so it came back to me. Okay, so hopefully our Lord and Saviour Eamon Brown can overlay some music underneath this at the moment. But Xander, I didn't get an agreement in principle from you. I feel like I got Mario over the line, but are you happy to accept a DJ and maybe even encourage DJs to play the music louder if it is comical, insightful, or has a link to what the player wanted played?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, if it fit those categories, I think I'm more just rebelling against mediocre DJs who just seem to be filling a spot for the sake of it. But if they did that, it'd be hilarious. Like, you'd enjoy that. Like, and I'd be curious. Would actually, as you say, you'd be curious to see what songs each player had selected. I like the idea of having them nominate what they should get for a try. I have a suspicion that Jerome Luai would have "The Man" by the Killers. Or something like that.
Yeah.
A really cocky song somehow or other.
Holy shit. And those 2 legends would choreograph something. If you want try celebrations to come back in full, I'm now starting to see that a DJ choreographed dance thing to it. Holy crap.
Well, basically, it needs to add to the game day experience. The problem with the rugby league is the game isn't very long and reserve grade and stuff doesn't draw people in. We need the game day experience to be good when all we're offering is, $12 mid-strength beers and really shitty meat pies. Let's find ways to improve the game day experience, and that's an inexpensive way to do it. Get someone clever. Let's just get you, Biggest. Let's get you out there, putting this to rugby league. You've got enough connections that you could find the right person. Give Wayne Pearce a call. He'll get onto Peter Volandis, and you're in. You're employed.
Yeah. What would we call this? Not the Apollo project, but maybe the Moonwalk project. Well, I don't really like Michael Jackson anymore, and we'll come up with a name because that's the important part. But the other encouraging thing is that I know there's a large proportion of the Sydney DJ media listen to this podcast, and they always listen to the 120th minute of it. So I'm sure that I won't need to do much work; that they'll be doing it now. I'd like to thank you again, Media Watch Mario, for your fantastic insights tonight. You were rageless, but still quite insightful. So thank you, Mario.
Well, Manly have been winning. The Blues are winning. I mean, apart from the 76ers, losing the other day, I've had a pretty decent sporting couple of weeks. So I've got nothing to rage about. I would just like to close by, again, we don't do it very often, but just a reminder, if the listeners could be so kind as to share our podcast around and give us a 5-star review on iTunes or on their podcast app of choice, that would be very helpful. If you do so, let us know. We'll happily give you a shout out on the show.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this part of the show, you are definitely a 5-star listener, so we thank you. Xander, your almost non-existent union chat today was highly appreciated. We'll get lots of feedback about that because essentially the only feedback I ever see the show get is about what you talk about and what people don't like about what you say. So congratulations on getting through a show almost completely unscathed.
Almost. I think it's completely. Have I raised union in any context? I don't think I have, have I?
It was mentioned.
Oh, you were very close with your wife, Tonga, that whole vibe. It was dangerously close. I think a lot of people assumed you were talking about union maybe at that time.
No. That was purely all rugby league. Nothing about union, well, I assure you.
Well, until
I have a clean sheet. No abuse on Twitter.
I don't know about that, but yeah, just like Queensland. Well done, 0. Until next episode, just do what Paul Green does after a bad bake. Talk about Ronaldo Mulitalo's recipe instead.